Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are totally flipping how you think about digital security. We're throwing out those generic, basic tech tips you've heard a million times. Instead, we're looking at how top-tier military intelligence and high-stakes investigative journalists handle absolute extreme risk. By combining this incredibly time-tested Department of Defense manual with a cutting-edge operational guide for journalists, we're going to build you a completely new mental framework for protecting your data.
So let me ask you a question you've probably thought about. Is a VPN enough for digital security? Like if you just buy the right subscription, install the app, click on, are you suddenly safe? We've all been kind of conditioned to treat security like a shopping list, right? Buy a VPN, download a secure messaging app, grab a password manager, and boom, you're invisible. Well, actually, scratch that, because that exact assumption is what gets people compromised.
Take a look at this quote straight from the Praxia Operational Guide for Journalists. This literally hits the nail on the head. Digital security is not a tool stack, it is a threat model. The very first thing you need to ask yourself isn't, hey, what app should I download? It's who exactly am I protecting, what information would harm them, and who wants that information. If you don't build that threat model first, any tool you buy is honestly just security theater. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First up, the illusion of security. Then, the 5-step OPSEC process. Next, indicators and how we leak. After that, digital defense in practice. And finally, habits over fortresses.
All right, jumping right into section 1, the illusion of security.
A lot of generic advice you see out there, stuff like just updating your software or using basic two-factor authentication, that is essentially 2015 thinking. Today's threat landscape, as outlined by Praxia, is absolutely terrifying. We aren't talking about random hackers guessing your password anymore. We're looking at commercial spyware deployed by nation-states, retroactive laws that can just suddenly criminalize your published material, and border agents who have literal forensic extraction kits that can pull your entire digital life apart in minutes. Oh, and the cloud? Major cloud providers can and absolutely will hand over years-old data based on legal subpoenas they aren't even allowed to tell you about. This is exactly why a simple tool stack completely fails against state actors or commercial adversaries with advanced forensic tools. So how in the world do we defend against all of that? Well, to solve these incredibly modern problems, we actually need to look backward to a tried and true theoretical framework, the Department of Defense Operations Security, or OPSEC Program Manual. This document is basically the bedrock strategy for protecting critical information in the most hostile environments you can imagine. Moving right along to Section 2, the 5-step OPC process. We are going to demystify all this military jargon and turn it into a universal problem-solving loop. The DoD manual breaks OPSEC down into 5 really essential steps. First, identify critical info, like what exactly would give your adversary an advantage if they got their hands on it. Second, conduct a threat analysis. Who wants it, and what are they actually capable of? Third, conduct a vulnerability analysis to figure out how you might be exposed. Fourth, conduct a risk assessment. And then, only at the very end, step 5, do you actually apply countermeasures? True security means figuring out what adversaries want and matching it to their capabilities before you ever even think about applying a single countermeasure. Now, let's zoom in on step 4, the risk assessment, because this table is fascinating. It shows how the military actually calculates risk. It isn't just a gut feeling, right? It's literal math. Risk is calculated by multiplying the threat severity by your vulnerability level. So if a highly capable adversary is targeting you, meaning high threat, and you're sitting on an open airport Wi-Fi network, meaning high vulnerability, the probability of losing critical information is high. It takes this abstract idea of risk and makes it completely tangible and quantifiable. If the resulting risk is unacceptably high, that is the exact moment you look at the cost and effort of throwing in a countermeasure to bring it down. Okay, Section 3, indicators. This is all about how we leak information. Now, this is arguably the most fascinating part of the DoD document. You know, adversaries usually don't need to pull off some crazy hack to get your most closely guarded secrets. They just follow your breadcrumbs, which the DoD calls OPSEC indicators. These are friendly actions or totally open source pieces of info that an adversary can piece together to figure out your secrets. The manual points out 5 major characteristics of these indicators: signature, associations, profiles, contrasts, and exposure. Basically, the routine things you do every day, the people you hang out with, and the digital footprint you leave behind are constantly leaking data to anyone who happens to be paying attention. Intelligence analysts catch these leaks by comparing your standard profile against contrasts. Your standard profile is just your normal everyday pattern of activity. But a contrast? That is a reliable deviation from your normal routine that basically screams for an analyst's attention. The DoD gives this amazing example. Imagine distinctive ground support equipment that is known exclusively for servicing strategic bombers suddenly showing up at a tactical fighter base. Even if they never actually see a bomber, an intelligence analyst knows exactly what's coming. And your digital life is exactly the same. Any sudden changes in your digital routine act like giant, flashy neon indicators to an adversary.
All right, on to Section 4, Digital Defense in Practice. Now that we've got the military theory down, let's bring this down to micro-level personal digital habits using that Praxia guide. The absolutely crucial point here is that behavioral discipline is the hardest part of digital security. Most of us just use a single shared digital identity for everything, right? Well, that is a massive vulnerability. You need what's called operational identity separation. This means using separate email addresses, separate phone numbers, and honestly, even different devices for different roles in your life. Forensic investigators literally do their jobs by finding one reused piece of infrastructure, like a phone number, and then correlating it across multiple services to map out your entire network. If you don't create that correlation in the first place, they can't track it. A perfect example of this behavioral gap is how we misunderstand encryption. So, end-to-end encryption like Signal protects the actual content of your message, but it totally does not protect the metadata, the data about the data. Think of encryption as the letter inside and the metadata as the envelope. Leaked metadata shows who you talk to, when, for how long, and from where. The Praxia guide strongly stresses that metadata, like those hidden GPS coordinates embedded in a photo or the revision history left inside a PDF, can absolutely burn a source, even if the message content itself was perfectly encrypted. You've got to strip your metadata before you share anything. Let's rapid fire through some really high-value, practical takeaways from the guide. First up, hardware absolutely matters. A recent iPhone with advanced data protection and lockdown mode turned on, or a Pixel running Graphene OS are highly defensible. Why? Because the hardware itself actively rate limits forensic tools trying to break in. That is literally a life or death difference for journalist sources. Next, when you're traveling, employ device minimization. Use a dedicated, totally wiped travel phone, because border agents have massive legal powers to seize and image devices. Ship your sensitive source material ahead of time via an encrypted cloud. Literally never carry it across a border. And finally, stop using SMS text messages for two-factor authentication. Switch to hardware keys, like FIDO2. These are physical USB keys you actually plug into your device, and they physically prevent live phishing attacks.
And finally, Section 5, Habits over Fortresses.
All of this builds to our final, really philosophical takeaway. Security is an ongoing practice, not a one-time setup. Adversaries change, their tools change, and the laws are constantly changing. Setting your security up perfectly in January and then completely forgetting about it by July virtually guarantees you're going to fail. To sustain your OPSEC routine, you need weekly audits of your active sessions just to make sure no one else is logged in. You need monthly reviews of your threat model. You absolutely need strict pre-trip checklists and immediate post-trip device wipes. Security has to be a living, breathing habit. I want to leave you with this absolute mic drop quote from Praxia. The fortress you build once and never maintain is not a fortress. It is a deceptively named building. Understanding military OPSEC and modern digital forensics isn't just about handing you a new list of software to buy. It's about giving you a totally new operational mindset. You now have the theoretical framework of the DoD and the practical reality of modern journalism. So, I challenge you. What does your threat model look like today? Grab a piece of paper, map out who you're protecting, and start building your real defense. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and stay safe out there.